The Woman in the Window, new film out on Netflix, directed by Joe Wright, whose previous film had been The Darkest Hour. This film has a pretty damn stacked cast, with Amy Adams, Gary Oldman, Julianne Moore, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Wyatt Russell, Brian Tyree Henry, and Anthony Mackie. The story centers Anna Fox, played by Amy Adams, who lives alone in this spacious old New York apartment, struggling with depression and agoraphobia. She never goes out. We learned that she did have some trauma in her past, and then that led to a suicide attempt, and she has been trying to get better ever since. But not very successfully. She continues to routinely mix her medicine with alcohol, which she shouldn't do. She refuses to try and go out, basically just exists. And one of her pastimes becomes watching people through her windows. And one day, a new family moves in across the street. And after a series of weird visits from the family members, Anna witnesses a crime through the window of their apartment, a murder. But seemingly no murder was ever committed. The police comes and they're like, "What are you talking about?" The family explains that actually nothing happened, and there is serious suspicion that her grasp on reality is fading, that she's hallucinating things and believing that events happened differently than they did. So the basic premise sounds kind of similar to the classic Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock, and the movie acknowledges that, addresses it directly by showing a couple of frames from that film in the opening sequence. But unfortunately, the amazing cast is not enough to carry this film, and it ends up being pretty damn underwhelming even without the direct Hitchcock comparison. I will start with the cast. Amy Adams is actually pretty decent in it. She gives a believable performance, and even if the script barely allows her to, I think she ends up pretty convincing. Definitely looks the part with the help of makeup to make her look untidy and depressed and just exhausted with life. The rest of the people are serviceable, although with the exception of Wyatt Russell, everyone else basically only has one or two scenes, and that's it. So those performances definitely feel pretty tiny. And then we get to Gary Oldman, who is just inexplicable. He's doing this exaggerated performance, shouting loudly, overacting, very stagey. I don't know what got into him, but that there's a moment where he confronts Anna about a thing, and he gets into her face with the shouting and so on, and I just burst out laughing. It was such an exaggerated, over the top performance. It's like he came from a different film. But turns out, maybe he just read the script and decided to base his act on the tone of the final act of the story. Because the film does take a hard turn, or rather a hard dive, towards the end. See, for a long time it's kind of spread between the murder thriller and psychological drama, with Anna at the center of both, and her and the audience trying to figure out what's actually happened, what was real, what was imagined only in her mind, and what the other characters may or may not be hiding. And then there's this big emotional climax, a reveal of sorts, which leans hard into the personal drama and exploring the fractured psyche of Anna. And then after that, the final act begins, and for whatever reason, it just suddenly turns into a slasher film almost. But the way it's written and shot, and especially edited together, it made it seem like it was parodying itself. I swear, during the entire finale, I was just laughing my ass off because of how comical it all was. It was extremely jarring because it's a huge tonal shift from what came before, from most of the movie. Now, I've read that when the film was first made, the test audiences found it extremely confusing. So perhaps this tonal shift is the result of reshoots that happened later in an attempt to fix the movie. I really don't know, but the final 20 minutes of the film, as it is, are just weird, out of place, stupid as shit, and yeah, unreasonably comical. Which is a shame because it essentially brings down the whole film as a result, which, other than that, had some promise. I think that the psychological exploration was fairly interesting, and perhaps there was even some way to salvage the murder plot, which ends up also kind of failing towards the end. But it does seem like the writer just gave up at one point and just rushed to the most awful conclusion they could think of. Waste of a great cast, if you ask me.